Wix Studio, one end-to-end web creation platform for your agency to deliver exceptional work with absolute efficiency.
This is you without Collaborator. Invisible, just another seagull. And this is you with Collaborator. Get noticed in the AI era.
Online visibility is not luck, it's a strategy. Combine SEO, digital PR, and content distribution to grow. Visit adz.com to learn more.
Hi everyone. So hopefully this is going to follow on from Jerome's deck, so hopefully we'll build on. This quick summary of what I'm going to present. I'll move on because when I did this talk to myself, I ran out of time. So I have used some AI images to support the decks, and I know that can go either way. So this is the prompt I actually used to create the images. At the end of the talk, I've got a QR code I can give to people, so you'll be able to download the deck easy, and it's already online. So when I was thinking about how to do this, so my background is data science, data engineering. And I've been using generative AI models since about 2021. And I was thinking about how to describe it to people. I've spent a career in marketing, so I was trying to think, what's the easiest way that people understand? So I came up with this as a journalist. So for me, a large language model is like the most forgetful journalist you've ever met in your life. And what's worse, because we've all trained everyone that they need a response in 3 seconds, it has to work really, really fast. And so its ability to try and come up with a coherent answer in a really, really fast way, whilst being the most forgetful journalist in the universe, gives it some challenges. So the similarities between a journalist and the LLM. So what I try to do is that a journalist gets given an assignment. The LLM gets given an assignment as well, your kind of question or prompt. Next, it goes down to, it may or may not use its internal knowledge to search for information to help it write that assignment, just like the LLM will. Then it will filter, and just like Jerome has kind of demonstrated, there is some act of where it's going to go and be selective. It may hit the site, it may use that content. Just like the LLM will do the same, and then eventually it's going to write, the journalist will write the article, just as the LLM will produce a response. And so what that means is that, generally speaking, if your content is in a form that the LLM cannot assimilate in a relatively rapid time, it's going to ignore it, just like Jerome touched on in his talk. And so the competitor potentially, but there's a but on that. I'm going to come back to it because you can't guarantee the competitors will get mentioned either. And we can show that. So if I go, this is a screenshot of AI overview. The journalist in this case, I should have said up front, is going to do an article on who the best SEO agency is. And so I just wrote in the question, and straight out, I've got highlighted the first brand, and there is a hyperlink to that brand within the response. And you'll see the same thing with ChatGPT and Perplexity and things like that, although there's kind of a nuance there, where if I ask the question a slightly different way, for me, there's a causal relationship in my head that says I'm asking the same question. I actually have gone to more of an informational response, and there's no brand mentioned there, and there's no citations. Yes, Google has done its Google thing, but if I was in ChatGPT, I wouldn't get the bit on the right. So we'll come back to this. I'm going to explain why. And so as a rule of thumb, if your brand doesn't get shown up, then it's not even going to consider you. And I'm going to show you why it got to that point. So the next slide is probably that I've oversimplified. So this is kind of the flow that a large language model goes through. And I've grossly oversimplified the slide. So Jerome touched on in his talk that I think it was a SEMrush slide from November 2024, but there was like a 50-50 split or 48-52 type split. So if you imagine, I think there's where you've got web search, HTML to plain text, embedding and filtering, and generate response, that bit, excluding the user prompt and the output, is essentially what the LLM is. And its architecture is more complicated than just saying LLM. So LLM on its own, as an AI model, it doesn't know how to search. It doesn't know how to understand a web page, like Jerome kind of proven in his talk. But I'll come back to that. So when a user prompt comes in, the way an LLM works is it will take your question, and it goes through a process called tokenization. And what that is, for I think, to keep things high level, is it take that sentence and it breaks it down into the individual words. Now, at this point, every AI ever written, ever built, is all based on mathematics. It doesn't understand words. It only understands numbers. So then after it's worked out what the tokens are, the words, it goes through a process called embedding. And this is the first moment where the AI is going to be using something, think of it like a matrix of numbers called weights. Now, everyone says that AI is undeterministic and it's too random. That is true to a degree, but every AI is reliant on statistical numbers called weights that drive a certain level of determinism or deterministic behavior. So it takes the token, it passes it to the embedding layer, and the embedding layer, its job is to say, right, the word hello maps onto this unique number, and this unique number is very specific to each AI. So the closed box that ChatGPT created, the closed box that Google created, the closed box Perplexity created, they create their own statistical weights. And how they understand the word hello is different to each and every single one. And so the next point is it goes through a number of different layers. So once it knows it's got something, it understands the numeric version of a word, it then takes the entire sentence and passes it into the core of the large language model. At this point, the large language model will do two things. It does something called attention, and the way to think of attention is like a chef who's looking at the ingredients for the meal they're about to make, and they're working out what are the most important ingredients. So that's attention. And the next thing is called feed forward, and it's trying to work out for each ingredient, or in the case of the journalist, which piece of content is the most important. Is it part of a common phrase? Or is it part of a more complex idiom? So for example, if I say that my team was on fire last night, it's trying to work out, was the team literally on fire? Or is it actually a synonym for good? And it does that repeatedly. And at the end, what happens is at the end of it going through this generating response, halfway through, it will make a decision. Do I have enough information to answer the question? If the answer is no, it will go outside and say, I need to its planner, and then that gets passed to something called an orchestrator. And the orchestrator is the bit that will say, I'm going to run this tool for you, and the tool is the web search. It's not it is part of the LLM, but it's separate from the core inner brain. It's basically saying, I'm going to tell my brain, telling my hand to hold the button and press next. Now, the keywords that get searched on and that we see in the search results are controlled by the brain, the LLM, but the actual execution of the fetch to go to google.com, do the web search, is controlled by the orchestrator. Now, at the end, it will do this iteratively, and it may do more than one web search. It may do one web search, it may do none. And then what will happen is it produces a single word at the output. Does the single word. And then what happens is this kind of repeats itself. It will go back, it will take that word, add it to the input question that you asked, and it will go through and do it again. And it will do it again and again and again until the LLM decides it's finished and it's got to the answer that you're asking for. So I'll move on, because I'm used up half my time, and but it's worth noting the point about schema, and I'll come to this, is that it's not the LLM that is interacting with your website. So when you see people online saying LLMs do not care about schema, technically they're absolutely right. An LLM doesn't care about schema. It only cares about the text that's passed into it. But it's the orchestrator that understands, that cares about how to read your site. So with this in mind, I created this dummy web page to represent my SEO agency that I want the journalists to find. And this is what we see. But Jerome had already touched on the fact that they don't understand JavaScript. They don't care about JavaScript and things like that. And so this is how an orchestrator, when it's read that website, this is what it converts it into. So this is the very same website I just showed you on the previous page. and it stripped everything away. It didn't care about the structure of the page. It didn't care about waiting for any rendered JavaScript. It just said, this is what I got. And it's completely, and it will include everything from the header to the sidebar and everything. Now, the orchestrator is not so dumb. It really does have some intelligence around the structure of the page. So if you're already creating websites that have good accessibility, good area kind of markup, you're using like, kind of article tags, main tags, section tags, and things like that, that's why you're going to stand out. But if you've got auto-generated HTML, and you're doing something like that, and you're not caring about accessibility, you're not caring about structure, you're not doing your H1 tags, your H2 tags, and doing things in a very nice, clean way, then you'll end up with just whatever it can scrape. So what happens when we introduce schema? So I wrote some code that emulates the orchestration layer that all AIs use. And I've got this code, it's up on the site, and so if you want to get access to the code, it's written in Python, but it's pretty short. And so this is what happened when I scraped a website that had no schema. And so what you can see is try to organize it in a way where it can make sense of it. So for example, we can see things that we can pull out. We know it guessed it was an article that was being said. It found the H1 tag. It couldn't find the author tag. It couldn't find any date published tag. And things like that. And so what it did, it summarized the content. And we know AIs are very good at summarizing pages. That's not the problem. But it's taken that summary and attributed it to a single attribute. But if I contrast that with a website that had actual schema, what it will do is it will go immediately and go and grab that schema. And the reason it does this is because this is a machine-readable format. And so we've spent like 20, 30 years building websites for people. You know, we write copy to persuade people. We make it look pretty to make it attractive for people. But the orchestrator isn't a person, it's a machine. And it's got a very limited set of rules it can use to read a page. And so the more help you can provide, you kind of drive the orchestrator to pass to the LLM the message that you want the LLM to process. Now, some people are going to say, well, I'm doing this already, but I'm still not showing up. And I'm going to touch on that next, of why this may be happening. So revisiting the flow that we had at the start, the two middle boxes are essentially what the large language model with its orchestrator and its planner are doing. So when the prompt comes in, it will make a decision based on a number of factors. And one of them that we know for sure is the timeliness. We actually saw this with the data that Jerome kind of showed in his presentation. If timeliness of data, so why does an AI choose whether to use its own data or whether it's going to go out to the internet? And I've got a slide that's going to show the difference. What we found with our own tooling is that where there's a need for up-to-date factual information, the LLM is more likely to go out to the internet. So for example, if you're in a fast-moving consumer goods environment where the customer has high intent to buy, then getting the customer to that information is more likely to solicit an internet search. However, with some of our customers who are more in the enterprise space, selling products that have probably 18-month to 24-month lead times. So like, let's say you're buying an ERP, for example. You're not going to go down the high street and just buy it. It usually takes at least 18 months of like IT planning, and then you'll go forward with it. And what we found was that content tends not to solicit a web search. And you could say, why does it do that? Well, it's probably slow to change. And so I think if I was to make one recommend right now, how can I guarantee that my content is more likely to be picked up, is I actively, even my evergreen content, I show that I'm reviewing that evergreen content frequently, and I'm making it easy for the orchestrator to see that it changed on a specific time. So schema can help with that. Yes, you could use sitemaps and things like that, but if you try to put information into little bits of places, you're making the machine's job harder to find out what it wants that you can give. So just a digression, as we saw on the first two slides with Google, how the person phrased the prompt can have a dramatic impact. And so just like with the journalist, if they go and talk to someone and they ask a question, they're going to get a different response. And so how the person actually asks the question will have a dramatic impact on whether or not someone will actually come and scrape your site and use you in a response. And we can see that if I come back to the screenshot I had at the start, I had asked a very awareness, kind of sales funnel awareness type question. And this person, what we found through our own tooling is that people, when you ask an awareness question, you're less likely to get a citation. The AI will say, it's an informational thing. I've already got that knowledge. I'm just going to give you that response. And we can see this even with Google, but we see it with ChatGPT and Grok and things like that. Where if I go to the second question I asked, it was more of a consideration question. So I'm already in decision mode with more buyer intent, and so instantly the AI has interpreted this, and it's already gone out and started saying, I need more relevant information, because the person is clearly looking to who the best is, and they most likely want to buy. I want to be the person who recommends who you're buying from. So what can't you control? And I've got 4 minutes, so I should speed up. The prompts. So Jerome touched on this. So I've seen it online where some people say you can actually get access to the actual prompt that the person actually asked. And there are clickstream sources where you could buy that. So if the person has subscribed to an open VPN, you're giving that information away. The only thing I would say about this data is you have no visibility to who the actual person was who asked the question. Does this person actually align with the customer base you're trying to target? So whilst, yes, you might get access to clickstream data, or someone who may have volunteered to have a plugin on their Google browser, their Chrome browser, to capture this information, does it map back to who you're actually trying to sell to? The other thing is when someone authenticates themselves, the platform is no longer the owner of the data. The data controller is the person, and the data processor is the platform. So you can't sell it anyway. GDPR and other things kick in. And in USA, there's about 13 states who have now adopted GDPR legislation as well. So that's the first thing that I would be wary of. The next thing is the orchestrator. You have no control over this. I'm going to skip because I've got 3 minutes, but the orchestrator will decide if and when it's going to follow the instruction from the LLM, and when it scrapes your site, it's going to decide how it's going to scrape your site. Okay. The next thing, the retrieval process. So I've seen some people online saying query fan out is all you need to know. The LLM, it's true, the LLM is responsible for identifying what keywords it wants the orchestrator to execute the web search on. That is absolutely true. However, how many it does and what it does with the results is up to the orchestrator, because the orchestrator will take the results, and it's not the LLM that's actually scraping the sites, it's the orchestrator. So how it reads the HTML before it passes that plain text string back into the large language model is up to the orchestrator. You have no control over that. And so, like I say, just to revisit, so this is your HTML is coming back into this format. So it's trying to make it machine readable. So what can you control? The first thing is schema means you're providing the LLM and the orchestrator with clearer notes. So you're making it the machine as easy as possible for the machine to understand the message that you want to give. The other thing I want to mention, just to digress, is as people on the left, we use causal understanding and our own memory to understand what we see. But a machine doesn't. It has no experiential memory at all. So like I said, just like the journalist, the LLM is the kind of most forgetful journalist you'll ever meet in your life. It doesn't understand that. All it has is the statistical data, the weights I described at the start, in order to try and interpret whether something has context and has relevancy. And so keep that in mind. So if you put some copy up there and the copy assumes that the person has some base knowledge, the LLM doesn't have that. So what does that mean? So when it comes to writing content, write it like a quotable press release. So yes, so you're already having to start, how do you find a balance to write things that are persuasive to a person, but to a machine doesn't really understand persuasion. It doesn't understand satire or anything like that. So you want to create content that the LLM will pick up and just present in a way. And so this is things that are well structured. These things are well structured. These are things that, I've got 1 minute. I've got a summary slide that will come back to it. The LLMs, the reason why I mention this, I know lots of people look at their web logs and find that they're not being used, but LLM.txt, or whatever format we do choose to adopt as an industry, it's all about making your site machine readable, not human readable, and that's the purpose of this file. Whether we use this one or another one, that's the goal of this file, even though the industry's not really moving over. Use agent. You could even, as the agent comes in, you can direct the agent to where you want the LMS.txt, your 301 redirect, or 302, I get the codes mixed up. We saw this slide on Jerome's deck, but why might people not be using schema? This is our tool. When we track schema, when we track the LLM at time of day, this was for a travel accessory type product. We found that between like 2 and 6 p.m. was where all the web searches happened. Outside of that window, the LLM didn't bother, just like Jerome showed on his slide. So we found at this one point in time of day, if I started tracking it at, say, 8 a.m. in the morning, I think my schema's not being used. But if I tracked it at 4 p.m., it is being used. And just to contrast that, this is the enterprise data I shared, only 5% of web searches for that content. And I think I should wrap up because I'm over. Happy journalist at the end. I'm sorry, everyone. Like I say, I'm James Hocking. I've got a QR code on a card if people want easy access to the downloads. That's already up there. Thank you. Hope that was useful.
Demand sphere. Limitless visual insights from the SERPs. Unlimited dashboards and users. Easy to use and easy to scale your growth to new levels.
You've got two blind spots, keyword rankings and LLM visibility. Now, most tools solve one, but AccuRanker solves both. See how at booth number 18.
Monthly reporting making you want to shove sharp things up your nose? Try Dragon Metrics, the all-in-one SEO software with mind-blowing reporting tools.
Wait, do you want free ice cream or do you want to know the latest in how search behavior is changing? If it's the latter, download Search Pulse by Reflect Digital. Get that now.